There we go. So to kind of demonstrate source control, what I'm going to do is make a Unity project and set it up with Git. So if you don't know what source control is, it is a way of basically making backups systematically of your project directory. So a big problem with having long-term, large-scale software development projects is that your hard drive fails quite often. And when that happens, and obviously not many people prepare for that, they're like, wow, I just lost all my work and I can't get it back. And even if it's not really that severe, maybe you just accidentally delete something, there's no way to get it back unless you diligently make backups. So what people started doing is, for software development projects, they developed source control. And in essence, source control allows you to make periodic check-ins of your code and all of the files in your repository, that is to say, just the little folder that your project is in. So it allows you to make these periodic check-ins, and then at any later date, you can revert the project back to whatever check-in that you made before. Those are called commits when we're talking about Git, but Git is not the only source control. It's the one, however, we use pretty often in the club. So yeah, another thing Git is really useful for, as well as other source control software, is collaboration. And that's mainly what we use it for as a club. Without using source control for collaborating with a team on a game project, you're basically sharing little snippets of the project version, and that gets really messy really quickly, because you have to send it over email or have a shared drive on Google Docs or something, Google Drive. It's really messy and it's bad. So we use source control to basically have these parallel project repositories that everyone makes changes to, and then occasionally they all sync up with each other at a central point. Typically that central point is on a server. We call those remote repositories. And the advantage of having them on a server is that they are off-site, so if something happens to your local repository, you still have that remote one that you can pull or download to whatever computer and continue working, so you haven't lost progress. The other advantage, especially for collaboration, is that you can basically synchronize all of these parallel repositories up to this central one, and then pull back down the changes. So if someone, maybe the programmer, made a new script that everyone else wants to try and have part of their project, they just commit that script change, send it up to the server, and everyone pulls that back down. And so now they have the version of the project with the script in it. Is there any questions on how source control kind of functions at a logic level? Cool. So I'm just going to do a little Git demonstration. I'm not going to go super in-depth on how to use Git. If you want to start using Git, I would definitely recommend it for any personal projects, because it just allows you to have a backup, a way to back things up in your project. But I'm not going to go into super specifics, so if you have any questions about that, you can ask later. We also have an actual full-on Git workshop that you can look in the Discord in the workshop archive for, if you're interested in learning Git at a more full level. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make a new Unity repository. Project. And it's just going to be, standard 3D cool project. And sure, I'll put it on the desktop. So it's going to make the repository. It's going to take a while, as it always does. And something I'm going to do while it's doing that is I'm going to look up the Unity Git Ignore. So what a Git Ignore is, other source controls have this concept, but a Git Ignore is just a file that tells Git, the source control, to ignore certain files in the directory. So when you make a Unity project, Unity generates a whole bunch of files that aren't actually necessary to have synchronized in the project. A bunch of cache files, a bunch of temporary files, stuff like that. And they're huge, and you don't want them, cluttering up your repository because you want it to be pretty small. So there's a pretty extensive Git Ignore that you can just search on Google for Unity projects. And you'll probably get on this page. You just click raw and then save the page. So then you can just navigate to whatever project folder you have. Let's say it is, where did it go?
Cool project.
Cool project, there it is. So make sure that you actually save this file in the quote-unquote root where you have this asset library packages folder. A lot of people make a folder for their repository and have a subfolder for the Unity project. You can do that, that's fine. Just make sure this .gitignore is in the same in the same directory as all of this. You also need to rename it to simply .gitignore. The reason why it's called that is because on certain operating systems, at the front of a file name just means hidden. So this is going to be a little hidden file.
You have to set it to all files.
Oh, do I? Let's see. This is still making the packet, the project, by the way. Cool. It is not here. Cannot actually move this. Get out of the way. Let's go over here. There it is down here. Oh yeah, no, that's Git Ignore source file. So yeah, it should look like this. You have all of these folders, and then this .gitignore. You can also so this is just a text file. You can open it with any text editor, Notepad, whatever. Unity is being very slow for the computer.
Everything is being very slow.
Yeah. So, this is what it looks like. It is just a list of files and folders. So this is, saying anything that's like library, log folders, stuff like that. If you had like some folder that you didn't want to, commit, maybe you have a temp folder, then you can just type the path. So assets, my cool folder. Just like that. So, I have no idea if this is going to open. It seems to have frozen. But it doesn't matter too much because we don't really care about the contents right now. So to actually initialize this repository, oh wow, still doing things. I'm going to open Git in this directory. There's a couple ways to do this. Again, I'm not going super specific, but pretty much, I have Git open, and it's in this directory. So I'm going to make this a Git repository by saying git init. That's going to make a little folder up here. This is where all the Git cache files are. And then I'm going to, again, wait for Unity to happen. Okay, so this is, looks good. Project is open. So I need to make sort of something called an initial commit, which is just, initializing the project folder with an initial version. So I'm going to add all of the files to my little commit. It's going to add all of these fun little files. Then I'm going to commit, and you give commits or versions their own little tag or name. So I'm just going to say this is the initial version. And so there we are. And you can see all of the past versions that you can go to. So, you know, it has this first version. So if we make a change to our repository, let's just say we add a new game object to our scene. Cool stuff. And then we save our scene. Remember that you do have to save your scene in order for it to actually take any effect. So now I'm going to go back into Git and see that it, you know, sees that my sample scene.unity has been changed. So if we want to make a new version where this is, you know, it knows about this, then we can just do the same kind of thing, add all of the files, make change to scene. And now if we go into git log, it says we have 2 commits, you know, make changes to scene and initial version. So if I want to go back to this version, then we can git check out, and then you can either copy paste this whole commit. There's also a shortened version of the commit ID, or you can just go back 1. There's really weird syntax for this program. It's weird. So now if we git log, we are in initial version. If we go back into Unity, it'll ask us to reload the scene because it was changed on the disk. And if we go back, now our cool thing isn't there anymore. So that's how you kind of manage these different versions. You do have to remember to check in every so often. It's not going to do this all for you, but it's a lot easier than making whole big backups of your project files. Making backups isn't a bad idea. You should probably do that, you know, on occasion, especially if you're not doing a remote repository. But yeah, this is a lot easier than doing that. You just make, you know, these little changes. Is there any questions on any of that? That was quite a long thing, but does that kind of make sense how that workflow works? If you're using other kinds of tools, other engines, there are, you know, different Git Ignore files. Some engines work better with source control than others. Unity is actually on the worst side of things. But typically you can just look up engine name and then Git Ignore, and you'll find whatever you need to set up a repository. So yeah, that's about it for the source control section.
Should we talk about pushing to GitHub real quick?
Maybe a good idea. I don't know if I'm signed into GitHub here.
I can sign in.
Yeah, so the purpose of this is because all of our game teams use Git and GitHub to collaborate. You're often expected in a team to be able to, you know, participate in that. So here we're just going to, yeah,
Do this part.
so we're just going to sign into a remote repository. And this remote repository is, you know, that thing where everyone is able to synchronize to get collaboration done.
What? Oh my
So typically what happens in a game team is the team lead will start the, or create the repository on their GitHub account, and then they add you as a, what's called a collaborator. And that just means you can make changes to the repository. GitHub's owned by Microsoft, so of course it's not easy to sign in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna make a new repository.
You here for the guide project?
Yeah, I'm here for the guide features, yeah.
So we've been talking about, for this week, source control and how to use it in game projects in Unity and stuff. Are you familiar with source control?
No, I'm not familiar now.
Okay. So to quickly recap, we have been recording and streaming this. So after the workshop, if you're interested, you can watch the video on YouTube,
Oh, that's so cool.
and you can catch up. But as a little refresher, source control is a way to make backups of a project,
Mhm.
and it's also a way to collaborate with team members.
That's really cool.
In VGDC, we use Git in our game projects to collaborate.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Alright, so I have made a new remote repository on GitHub. So what I'm gonna do is push my changes onto GitHub. Basically, committing will store your changes locally, but if you want to have them also go to GitHub, you'll need to push it to there. So first thing, it'll give you all of the commands that you need. So the first thing I'm gonna do is use this one, which basically, it's adding a remote repository named origin, right? Is
Yes.
that how it works?
Yes. So it's not a super important detail, but you can have multiple remote repositories. So the default name is just origin, so you can just go with that.
So I'll add that, and then I will do this last command, which is git push. I should mention, if you are working on a team, you always want to do git pull before you push,
Yeah.
because that will get all of the remote changes and add them to your repository.
Yeah, there's some specifics about how to properly do collaboration, but again, we don't really have time to go over all of that. So if you're on a game team doing this, they'll probably be familiar with how this works.
I cannot type today. So this will push our changes to the repository, and I believe what this does is it sets the default remote repository.
Yeah, there's
So-
a lot of implementation details here that are just way too much, but
Oh my god.
you also often have to sign in, so you just put in your username and password, and it'll be able to authenticate you on whatever remote you're using. GitHub is the most popular, it's the one we use a lot, but there are a lot of other hosting sites, stuff like GitLab, and so on.
So after this has finished, if we refresh the page,
Your username is Chase.
that's interesting.
So yeah, that is just a copy of the project. So
Yeah.
anyone who wants to collaborate with you, they can just go to this page and what is called cloning the repository. It's just downloading it and making a parallel version.
And then after you've pushed the first time, you don't need to type that whole command. You can just type git push because you've set the default, so it'll automatically push to whatever remote you had it set to.
Any questions about, you know, the broad strokes of how collaboration would work? Okay, then that's basically it.
I'm gonna
for our-
delete this,
Yeah.
I guess.
And you can stop streaming, we're pretty much done. You have to type the actual full name.
I
Then
did.
it sparks slash.
Oh. It doesn't usually make you do that. There we go. Alright, that is it.